You know, it seems like every single year, at least for the last 5 or 6 years, I sit down to do this Florida State preview and prediction videos about this time every single year. And I tell myself the same thing. Florida State cannot stay this bad for very long. This is the year. They're going to get better. They're going to improve. They're going to make a bowl game or win 8 or 9 games or whatever it is. And I sit down and I get on the computer and I do my homework and I look up recruiting classes and transfer additions and what the overall roster looks like and quarterback situations and how much talent is there. And then, well, what does the schedule look like? Where's the tough road games? What about the non-con schedule? And I just keep coming to the same conclusion every single time. This is not the year. Good morning, it's Uncle Lou here. Yeah, that's right, it's me, Uncle Lou, live on LouTube for you. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate it also. And in addition to that as well, subscribe to this channel if you're not already. I post college football videos almost every single day of the year, and believe it or not, some of them are even watchable. I don't know about this one. You can let me know in the comments down below if you think this one's watchable or not. And at the end of the video, when I give you my record prediction here for Florida State, you can let me know if you think I'm right or wrong. And if you think I'm wrong, let me know what I'm wrong about. Who do you think Florida State will beat? Who do you think they'll lose to this year? Shout out to Malcolm H. over on the Uncle Lou Patreon page. He suggested I do this Florida State game-by-game prediction. So, Malcolm, this one's for you, buddy. I really appreciate you helping to support the channel over on the Patreon page. If you want to help support the channel, the Patreon page is a great way to do it. Just click the link in the video or in the description of this video. It'll take you over to the Patreon page and you can look around. You'll see the post I made about these prediction videos. Just leave a comment on that post with what team it is you want to see me do, and I'll make sure I get to it. Every day when I sit down and do these prediction videos, that's the first thing I do. I head over to that Patreon post, I scroll through the list, and I pick a team off of there to do a preview and prediction for. I'm going to continue to do these prediction videos throughout July and into August, so I hope to get 40 or 50 of them done at least before it's time to start the football season. But let's get into this video, Florida State. Now, of course, Mike Norvell's been there for 3 years, I believe now. Came in during around the COVID time. Florida State was a complete mess when he got there. Now, normally, if I look at a coach who's been somewhere 2 or 3 years and I don't see that much improvement, I start to get worried. It's not that I'm not worried about Florida State, but I don't necessarily think Mike Norvell is the problem. Florida State had a lot of issues, both internally within the athletic department and with the roster that Mike Norvell inherited. Florida State had let itself fall behind with facilities, fall behind in recruiting budgets, fall behind in terms of staff. You see all these teams now. The NCAA limits the number of on-field coaches you can have. There's no limit to the number of support staff you can have. You can have 2 or 3 people in your recruiting department, or you can have 20. You can have 1 or 2 analysts sitting in a room studying film and tape and game plans, or you can have 20, right? Florida State's finally upped the ante this season. They've written some checks. They've allowed Mike Norvell to go out and hire some additional support staff, including, I think most importantly, some recruiting staff and some additional off-field analysts, which I do think is a big deal. Like I said, you see a lot of the big boy programs doing this. So I think Florida State is making steps towards becoming relevant again in the world of college football. I just don't know that we're going to see those results this year. When you look at last year, of course, it was another bad season, really, by any measurement. I think they went 5-7. They did beat Miami somehow, which I still don't understand how that happened. Miami was one of the hottest teams in America the last month of the season, right? I think Miami won 5 of their last 6 games, and their only loss was to Florida State. So a little bit of a bright spot in an otherwise pretty bad season last year for Florida State. When you look at what they lost and what they got coming back, we'll start on the offensive side of the ball. Jordan Travis is back at quarterback. I'm not convinced that's a great thing. I haven't been sold on him since the day he got there. Mike Norvell and Florida State were not sold on him heading into last year, which is why they brought that transfer in. Unfortunately, things didn't work out. Jordan Travis was still the QB. Now, the good news is Jordan Travis is 5-2 in his last 7 starts at quarterback. So maybe we're starting to see some improvement there. But what does he have to work with? Well, when you look at the wide receiver room, it's going to be a bunch of new faces there. Florida State brought in 4 or 5 wide receivers through the transfer portal. We're seeing a lot of teams do this now. The days of rebuilding your roster over a 4-year period through recruiting are sort of over right now anyway in the world of college football because of the transfer portal, which is basically free agency. You're seeing teams turn their roster over almost yearly. Southern Cal is a great example of this. They've brought in 20-something people just in the transfer portal at Southern Cal. Florida State didn't bring in quite that many, but 4 new faces, and it could be the 4 best wide receivers on that team. I got a guy from Wisconsin that looked really good in the spring game. So the receivers, there's some potential there. It's just kind of unknown because, like I said, the 4 that are transferring in, we've just never seen play in a Florida State uniform. We just don't really know how that's going to work out. At running back, no superstar, in my opinion. There's no Cam Akers, that's for sure. There's no Dalvin Cook, that I can tell you. Now, it's going to be kind of a running back by committee approach at Florida State. They do return one guy who had 500 and something yards rushing last year and was pretty good catching out of the backfield too. I think he had, average 6 or 7 yards a catch out of the backfield. So he's a guy that can both run and catch for you with routes out of the backfield. But I think you're going to see 2, 3, maybe even 4 running backs play this season for Florida State. Maybe to go with the hot hand. Maybe it's a running back by committee approach. We'll have to wait and see. Offensive line, which was an issue last year, I'll talk more about in a second. They bring a guy in from Wisconsin to try to help bolster that unit there. And, of course, if you don't know anything else about Wisconsin, you should know they always have a ton of great offensive linemen. So we're going to need to see a big improvement in Florida State's offensive line from last year to this year. Florida State's offense overall last year was okay, and there's some really, really good bright spots, red zone being one of them. They had one of the best red zone percentages in the country last year. Where they really struggled was on third downs. They were terrible, especially on 3rd and long. And they had a ton of negative plays. I think they had a total of like 360 yards lost last year on negative plays, which puts them in the bottom 10 in all of college football. So we've got to clean up some of those mistakes and hope that the offense can take a lot of steps forward. And that's going to start, I think, with quarterback Jordan Travis. You look over on the defensive side of the ball. Now, some good news here. The defense was actually pretty good last year, and they returned most of the 2 deep from last year. Now, they do lose a couple of guys to the NFL, most notably, I think, Jermaine Johnson, pass rusher on the outside that you got in the transfer portal, actually from UGA a couple of years ago. He had a really, really good season, so you got to replace that. Again, you dipped into the transfer portal here. You actually brought a guy in from the University of Albany to play up front and a guy from Central Florida to play at linebacker back in the middle. The front seven's going to have to play better. You get most of your secondary back, so I think that's a good thing. If the defense can improve even just a little and the offense can improve a lot, then I think Florida State can have a much better year than they had last year. We'll have to see. Let's put Florida State's schedule up on the screen right now and take a look at realistically what they might be looking at here. Now, the good news is you start off with kind of a nothing game against Duquesne. Now, generally, these are not exciting games. Fans don't like them, and, we all know the stories about playing cupcakes. Everybody does it, though. If I'm a Florida State fan, I'm okay with starting out with a game like this year. I mean, let's just be honest. Florida State hasn't made a bowl game since 2019. They need every win they can get, and if that means starting out with somebody like Duquesne as opposed to playing some kind of big Power 5 non-con matchup in week 1, I'm all for it. Plus, it gives you an opportunity to see a lot of these new players that you brought in through the transfer portal in week 1 against an inferior opponent without having to worry about taking a loss to one of the big boy programs. I think you'll beat Duquesne no problem. The loss to one of your big boy programs may come in week 2, though, when you host LSU. I got to put these, let me put the green thing up on it. People get mad when I don't put these green squares up on the screen. Which I think it was the Miami video. I forgot to put the green and red squares up, and people got mad. I didn't know you guys enjoyed the green and red squares so much, so I'll try to make sure I include those in the rest of these prediction videos. But I got you 1-0 after beating Duquesne. I do think you lose to LSU. Now, technically, this is a neutral site game played in New Orleans, not Baton Rouge, but that's kind of like Georgia playing Oregon in Atlanta. It's basically a home game for Georgia. This is basically a home game for LSU. Now, this is interesting because LSU has been down as well. They've had a couple of 6-6 or 5-7 seasons. Fired Ed Orgeron last year after winning the national title just 2 years prior in 2019. But 2020 and 2021 were horrible for LSU. So they bring in Brian Kelly. So on one hand, I'm looking at Florida State and I'm saying, well, they've had the same head coach for 2 or 3 years, returning quarterback, lots of stability. That's an advantage for Florida State. But then I look at LSU and I say, yeah, it's a new quarterback, a new head coach, but it's Brian Kelly. The guy's got a ton of experience in the Power 5. Was at Notre Dame for over a decade, averaged almost 11 wins a year during that time, made the playoffs once, made a national title game once, made several New Year's Six bowls. He lost them all, but he's at LSU now. There is some talent there. They got to figure out the quarterback situation. They got 2 or 3 options. We'll see which way they go. But LSU is also always one of the most talented teams in the country. They've got top 5, top 10 talent almost every single year, even when you account for the transfers that they lost this offseason. They're still a really, really talented team. And I just don't think Florida State can go out there and win the game. I've got LSU beating FSU in week 2. But this will be a good game. Look, I'm not writing Florida State off in this game. I mean, LSU is one of the biggest unknowns, I think, this year in all of college football. Because of Brian Kelly coming in first year, what sort of scheme or philosophy is he going to have there, both offensively and defensively, and because the quarterback situation is kind of up in the air, and LSU's just been horrible for 2 years straight. Florida State's been bad for longer than that, though, and again, I consider this basically a home game for LSU, but I would not be shocked if Florida State somehow went on the road and pulled off the upset here. But in this prediction video, I've got to give the edge to LSU. I've got Florida State now at 1-1. You come back home then and you play a couple of your first conference game. On the road at Louisville. Louisville's another team that it seems like they're going to be better than they are every single year. I've been disappointed in Louisville for the last couple of years now. Maybe they haven't been quite as bad as some of the other teams out there, but compared to what I expected to see from Louisville over the last couple of years, it hasn't worked out. I really like their head coach that they hired, was it Scott Satterfield or whatever? Hasn't worked out yet, and I think he's in a position now, much like Norvelle, where they need to win this year. I don't think Norvell's going to get fired this season at Florida State, and I don't think Satterfield's going to get fired at Louisville. But if they have bad seasons, either one of them or both of them this year, I think both of those coaches will be coaching for their job next year. In today's college football, you just can't afford to sit around and let a coach muddle through 5-6 years in a row, barely making a bowl or missing a bowl. So this is sort of an important game, I think, for both teams. Both of these teams, I think, are kind of in similar spots. This one's on the road for Florida State. I'm going to be honest. I'm giving Florida State the benefit of the doubt here and giving them a win. I think it's much more likely you lose to Louisville than it is you would beat LSU. I still think there's a chance either of those could happen, but I've got you 2-1 after your first conference game, which is on the road at Louisville. And let me mention, too, in case you're wondering why Florida State has 2 bye weeks, they play in week 0. So that Duquesne game is actually a week 0 game. You see it there on August 27th. That's actually week 0. September 4th, when they play LSU, is actually week 1 of the college football season when everyone else starts playing. You got 4 or 5 games this year in the quote-unquote week 0. Florida State's one of them playing Duquesne. So I've got Florida State at 2-1 after beating Louisville on the road to kick off ACC play. Then you come back home and you play Boston College, and I sort of feel the same way about Florida State versus Boston College as I do about Florida State versus Louisville. There's really no outcome that would surprise me. If Florida State lost this game, I wouldn't be shocked. They've got a good quarterback in Phil Jurkovec. I think they're going to be able to put some numbers up. If you're a Florida State fan, you're going to have to count on your defense in this game to try to slow him down. Now, obviously, it's an advantage getting this game at home. Long way to travel for Boston College. Again, I feel like I'm giving Florida State the benefit of the doubt here and giving them the win. I thought about doing a split on these Louisville-Boston College games and thinking maybe Florida State wins one of them or loses one of them. I just couldn't make up my mind which one I thought they would lose. And the way I do these prediction videos, I have to at least have some amount of confidence that a team's going to lose before I actually pick them to lose. So I came down giving Florida State the win in both of these matchups at Louisville and home against Boston College. Florida State's at 3-1. Fans are going to be happy to see that. That's the good news. The bad news is the next 3 games on this schedule are absolutely brutal if you're Florida State. Florida State is not as good as any of the next 3 teams they're playing. You can get mad, pout, and cry that I'm saying you're not as good as Wake Forest, but you're not as good as Wake Forest. Florida State will be an underdog in all 3 of these games. Home against Wake Forest, on the road at NC State, and home against Clemson. In a couple of those cases, you may be significant underdogs. I've got you losing to Wake Forest at home. I just think even as good as Florida State's defense was last year and potentially as good as it could be this year, Wake Forest offense is going to put up ridiculous numbers. They return a lot off of that offense from last year that was scoring 50, 60, in some cases 70 points a game. I think that's too much for Florida State to handle right now. I think they take a loss. They're 3-2. You look at the next one, it's on the road at NC State. I think it's possible NC State might be the best team in the ACC this year. I really think it's down to NC State, Clemson, and Miami in terms of who could be the best team. And I know that's going to make you mad too, as a Florida State fan, that I say Miami, but I'm sold on Mario Cristobal. But anyway, we'll talk about that when we get a little bit further down the schedule. I can't see a scenario where Florida State wins on the road at NC State, barring something unforeseen happening like injuries to NC State early in the season at key positions, which is impossible to predict in July. Here we are, July 1st. By the way, today, July 1st, this is the last month of the year without any college football, so we've just about made it through the offseason. Congratulations. You come back home to play Clemson. As much as the chatter and the talk has been this offseason about how Clemson was down last year, can we try to take a second and put that in perspective? Clemson was only down last year compared to how good Clemson was the 3, 4, 5, 6 years before that. When you're at a state where you go 10-3, and people call it a down year, and that was Clemson's record last year, was 10-3, a one-possession loss to the national champions, Georgia, a close loss to NC State, and I can't even remember who the other loss was to now, but Clemson 10-3. If that's a down year, I'll take it, and anybody would take it. Clemson's defense is going to be one of, if not the best in the entire country, not just the ACC, but the entire country. Their front four, in particular, their defensive line is full of future NFL players. I just don't think from a talent perspective, Florida State can pull this off. Even if Florida State played a perfect, flawless game and Clemson struggles offensively again this year, I don't think Florida State's offense is going to be able to score enough points on Clemson's defense to win that game. I've got you losing 3 in a row here to 3 pretty good teams in the ACC, Wake Forest, NC State, and Clemson, and that's going to give you another much-needed bye week here heading into the last half of the season. Now, you come out of your bye week, and you'll be able to lick your wounds no problem here with a home game against Georgia Tech, which I expect to be one of the worst Power 5 teams in America. Georgia Tech, Kansas, Arizona. I think those are just 3 horrendous teams. Florida State should win that game. No problem. Yes, I hate Georgia Tech because I have to, but let's be real. They've won, 3 games, 3 years in a row. Speaking of coaches who hadn't worked out, Jeff Collins, I'm talking to you, lady. This is Jeff Collins' last year in Atlanta. He will be fired by the end of this coming season. You can write that down. And then you got the big rivalry game this year on the road at Miami. Florida State pulled off an upset in this game last year, beating a red-hot Miami team. Tyler Van Dyke was putting up ridiculous numbers at quarterback for Miami the last half of the season last year, and Miami kind of laid an egg on the road at FSU. This year, Florida State's got to travel down to Miami to play the Canes. I'm a believer in Miami, especially quarterback Tyler Van Dyke. If he plays all year like he played the last half of the season last year, I think Miami could get to 10 wins in the regular season, and one of them is going to be against Florida State. I'm sorry. I know, if Florida State went 1-11, but they beat Miami, that they could stomach that. You beat them last year. I think you're going to have to just hang on to that for another year. I don't think you've got what it takes to win on the road at Miami this year. I'm a huge believer in Mario Cristobal, and I've got more bad news for Florida State fans. Whatever you think about Miami and whatever you think about Mario Cristobal, particularly maybe his in-game coaching or his development or whatever you want to call it, if you don't think Miami is about to be or have one of the most talented rosters in America in 2 or 3 years, then you just haven't been paying attention. Mario Cristobal is an elite recruiter from South Florida, ties all over the place in the Southeast, and he has brought in an entire staff full of elite recruiters. Whatever you think Miami's talent level is today, if you think it's here, give it 2 years. It's going to be here. The talent level at Miami is about to go through the roof. That's just a fact. Doesn't make me happy to say that. I'm no Miami fan. In fact, I spent the last 3 days of my life trolling Miami fans into oblivion. They're so mad they can't stand it. But the reality is Mario Cristobal is an elite level A++ recruiter, and the talent level is about to increase at Miami, which is going to put Florida State behind the 8 ball, I think. I think Miami gets it done this year, and this could be the start of building towards something at Miami, especially when it comes to this Miami-Florida State rivalry. I think Miami is already ahead of Florida State in terms of overall talent, just my opinion, and I think that gap's about to get wider. I think Miami beats you this year. Then you got to go on the road and play Syracuse, another coach I think that's in his last year. I think Babers will be fired at the end of this year. That year they won 10 games. It seems like that was 100 years ago. Every other year up there is 3, 4, 5 wins. It's just been horrendous. The only thing that worries me about this game, well, there's 2 things that worry me about this game. Back-to-back road games are always tough. You got to go to Miami, and you got to go to Syracuse. The other thing that worries me is the week before, you play Miami, which is your biggest rival. It's an emotional game. I think you're going to lose. We do see teams sometimes get beat twice by the same team. You can't let that happen. If you lose that game to Miami, you got to pick yourself up and get ready for the next week on the road at Syracuse, because Florida State is a better team than Syracuse. Florida State should be able to beat Syracuse, whether it's played in Tallahassee, in Syracuse, or on the roof of a dollar store. It really shouldn't matter. My only concern is the back-to-back road games and the fact that it comes after a rivalry game that I think you're going to lose, and sometimes that can take a toll on a team physically and emotionally. But I've got you beating the Orange on the road at Syracuse. Then you play Louisiana. This is interesting here. Your last two games of the year, Louisiana Raging Cajuns and the Florida Gators. Florida has a brand-new coach, Billy Napier. Where'd they get him from? Louisiana Raging Cajuns. Now, I think you're going to beat Louisiana. Now, they are a good team. Are they a great team? No, but they're a good team. That's why Billy Napier is now the head coach at Florida, because of what he was able to do at Louisiana. But again, no matter what anybody thinks about Florida State's recruiting over the last few years, or the talent level currently on the roster, or whatever, the bottom line is they've got more talented players than Louisiana does, and Florida State should win this game. It's at home, and I think Florida State will win this game. I said earlier I don't think Mike Norvell has anything to worry about this year. If you lose to Louisiana and Florida to end the season, then all bets are off. You have to win this Louisiana game. The following week is sort of another rivalry game. I really don't know how much Florida State and Florida fans consider that game to be a rivalry. I'm a Georgia fan, so I interact with a lot of Florida fans, and I rarely hear Florida fans talk about the Florida State game. I also interact with a lot of Florida State fans here on YouTube, and they mostly talk about the Miami game. So I know this is a rivalry game, and I'm not trying to say that it's not. I mean, these are two in-state schools. This rivalry is definitely second fiddle, though, to Florida State-Miami. I think we can all agree on that. But it is a big game, comes at the end of the year. A lot of coaches have been fired for losing this game over the years. I don't know if that's going to happen in Norvell, but I do think Florida, who I don't think is going to have a great year. I haven't done my Florida prediction yet, but I don't think Florida is going to have a great year. But it's in Gainesville. I do think Florida gets the job done and beats Florida State. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I've got Florida State at 6-6 this year. You were 5-7 last year. You haven't made a bowl game since 2019. The only real good news that I see here is that you will make a bowl game this season. I've got the Noles at 6-6. All right, I appreciate all of you watching. Let me know down below what you think about this game-by-game prediction. Which games did I get right? Which games did I get wrong? Let me know, and I'll see you again real soon. Have a good morning.